me.
Stephen.
It's me.
Good to see you. Come on. Welcome to Woodstock.
Thank you.
So, Stephen, I was asking you how Michael Musto started to write for the Soho News.
Cynthia Heimel had a centerfold every week in the Soho News, and it had a lot of components. And one time she had a contest, a writing contest, and Michael Musto from the Brooklyn, the lonely Brooklyn boy.
We have to stop. Cut. The chairs are squeaking. It's really noisy. So.
Well, I realized I wasn't talking to him, so I moved.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So let's get set.
Move a little closer. A little bit. Okay.
Should I sit in
Yeah.
his lap?
Yeah,
Should I sit in your lap?
Yeah. he said
These
it's loud.
chairs have always annoyed me, and I mentioned it once to Luann, and she said, "Oh, don't be silly. You're worrying about such unimportant things."
Okay. Scene 2, take 2. Action.
So, Stephen, remind me how Michael Musto started writing for the Soho News.
Cynthia Heimel had a column, you may recall, actually a two-page spread in the
Centerfold.
paper called The Centerfold. And it had a lot of stuff, including me. I wrote stuff, and she had a horoscope, and she had a little story that was running, a serial story, and she had a contest, a writing contest. And Michael Musto entered the contest, and he won, and then he got to write for the magazine. And he is one of the few people still operating.
Still writing.
Still, yeah, having it writing as a career now.
Well, I mean, a number of people went on. I was just thumbing through. Here is a column called Soho Go-Go that I edited in the music section, and the author is Ira Kaplan, known now to music fans as the leader of Yo La Tengo, an absurdly successful rock and roll band.
I know.
And he used all of the influences that he wrote about in his column, which was fantastic. He was one of those people, he just knew everybody in this sort of off Broadway version of rock at that time. It wasn't just CBGBs and Maxes. He knew all of the bands, all of the up-and-coming stars of the future. Here's Lenny Kaye's name in boldface. And he's writing about the Trogs and Ray Manzarek and the Plugs and Black Flag. And then he went on to use all of that to create his own band with his wife. And
Who's the other guy? It's him, his wife, and
oh, I
he's the
forgot.
third person, right? And what does Yo La Tengo mean?
I got it.
That's what it means?
It's something Latin American ball players yell when they're chasing a fly ball. Yo la tengo.
So why would they name the band that?
Because Ira was a baseball fan. In fact, we used to play softball together. Remember, there was a publishers league, and we played in Central Park. And one time we were warming up. We were doing a practice in a baseball diamond right off of Houston Street, which is now where the NYU gym is located. And Ira was batting, and my girlfriend at the time, Leslie Vinson, was pitching. And
Leslie Vinson?
soft pitch. Yes.
Was your girlfriend
She
at the
worked
time?
at
I didn't
the,
know that.
Oh, okay. We'll have to take that part out. And it's soft pitch, underhand, and Ira's like whacking the ball as hard as he can, And I said, Ira, be careful. You almost hit her with that one. And sure enough, with the next pitch, he hits it right back at her, broke her jaw.
Oh, yes.
Had to take her to the hospital to get it set, and
She had her jaw wired for
It
the
was
longest
wired
time, and
shut,
she had to
yes.
drink through a straw.
It was
I remember
horrible.
that,
Yeah, and it was all Ira Kaplan's fault.
Oh, I noticed. I guess for taking her out there.
So you never knew what was going to happen at the Soho
Yeah.
News.
No, it was like a little club unto itself, I think.
So
We were a very tight-knit group.
it was, yes, but we got that because we were working in a very close space, which changed occasionally. You know, we were on Spring Street or Worcester Street or Broadway, and I think in one of the iterations of the office, the production was downstairs. It was in the basement, and there was a dark room, which was actually one of those outdoor barns.
I know.
Goldstein.
Booze Barn. We called
Booze
it.
Barn. Because,
That was 111 Spring.
Right, and you know, either Boo or Goldstein had the idea of, you know, let's just buy one of these cheap outdoor metal barns
Yeah.
and put it in. We had an instant.
But we were always covered in wax, the hot wax, all of us. We pasted our own stories down. We made our own prints. It was amazing.
Yeah, everything hung on boards. It
Yeah.
was, I mean, the typesetting was done by a compositor, but other than that, it was all mechanical. It was all hands-on. So yes, you got to know people, and if you were working next to someone at the light table, or then you know you ended up going out together eventually, or whatever. But so how did you first come to Seven News? Because I forget. It seemed like you were always there.
I was walking down the street, and I ran into Cynthia Heimel, my old college chum. And,
What college?
well, Philadelphia College or what, but she was a nude model there.
Ah,
So I call her my college chum. And she said she was pasting up classified ads in the Soho News.
that's right.
And if I needed a job, which I did, I could maybe get a job working. So I did. I went there, and she and I pasted up tiny, you remember, little tiny, minuscule, we had to wax them and everything and put them on the board. It was a messy job, and it looked awful. And so then I got, actually, once you worked or once you were inside the Soho News, you were able to write. Pretty much anyone
Right.
could be commandeered to write a story. And so I was one of those people, and I wrote, I think I did an interview with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
And I reviewed a David Bowie concert. Those are the two things. And I interviewed Sparks, my favorite band at the time, and I still love them.
Yeah.
And then the centerfold came, and then I had a story in the centerfold. I mean, every week, mental notes.
We had a column called Mental
A column,
Notes.
yeah. I had a column called Mental Notes every week. And one thing led to another, and then I lived a block away from the Mud Club. So I was there all the time writing about that scene.
Well, which opened in, 1978. And it was, but Cynthia herself started out in Paste Up. She was in Paste Up.
Yeah, she was pasting up the
The little-
classifieds.
Oh, right, okay. And then she got writing assignments. She wrote some articles for me. I was the music editor, and then she became an editor as well. She became
Yeah.
the features editor there, and it gave me assignments, weird assignments, like going to interview this German psychic who was traveling under the name of Swami Narayama, and but he was from Canada. So a German psychic from Canada with an Indian name. And he was actually very impressive. You know, he knew about things from my childhood, and ear infection that I had when I was 6 years old, and crazy kind of stuff. So it ended up being, I went there, sure that I would unmask this guy as a complete phony. Ended up writing a somewhat favorable piece about him. But something I never would have written about. I was a music writer.
Was that a feature story?
That was,
Yeah.
it became a feature. Another time she sent me to interview when the movie The Brink's Job came out, the film company, the studio, was sending around two of the guys who actually pulled the Brink's Job, two of the original bank robbers. And I interviewed them rather than, the actors in the movie. And they were fantastic. They said they hated lotteries, a lotto, whatever you call it, because they said this was like it was impoverishing, housewives and people without money. They said, at least when you ran the numbers, it was like, you put down $1 or something. He says, now people are going out and they're blowing the family bankroll for the week. They're blowing the food money on these state-sponsored lotteries. It was the worst thing that ever happened. So again, you never knew what you were going to come across when you went out.
So we're looking at all these, well, not all, but we're looking at a lot of old issues that are yellowing. I'd like to know, what do you think, what was your favorite part of the newspaper, other than your music section?
Well, I liked the centerfold because it was so multifarious. There were so many things going on, and it changed. Sometimes there'd be just photos in there, or there'd be a photo spread, or I think, wasn't it, we were just looking at Marcia Resnick's photo spread of the Kipper kids.
Oh.
But usually it had different elements. Heimel's story, Short Pants Romance, was like an ongoing serial. And people who I knew or who worked at the paper would show up there as characters, sort of vaguely concealed. And then she had the Ms. Lonely Hearts column, which, like most of these sort of advice columns, depended on letters that did not come into the paper from outside, but were written. And every once in a while, Cindy would say to me, I need a letter. Can you write a letter, Peter? And so I had to think up some kind of...
there was some fudging going on, yeah.
Quite a bit of fudging.
Yeah. Do you remember Gertrude's Follies?
Yes.
Which I don't see in any of the ones we have here.
Well,
By Bill...
Plimpton?
Gertrude's Follies? Yes.
Bill Plimpton.
Who is a famous cartoonist now.
Went on to become another, future star who worked at Soho News. But that ran in the centerfold sometimes, too.
And the Intrepid Photographer. The Intrepid Photographer.
Oh, and the Intrepid
Yes,
Photographer.
here's an example. It says Sylvester Stallone with, "Don't take my picture," snarls Sylvester Rocky Stallone to the Intrepid Photographer at the birthday party for Studio 54 owner Steve Riddell, as the beautiful actress Sherry Sloanen looked on. Sherry who? Perhaps a future date of the Intrepid Photographer, one never knows. But that was the funny thing. All these things were happening, and this is from 77. So the year that Studio 54 opened, within 6 months the Mud Club opened, and there were all of these clubs, jazz clubs, jazz lofts, rock clubs, all opening within walking distance of each other. Well, of course, Studio 54 was in Midtown, but the Mud Club was sort of the downtown, was the anti-Studio 54.
It was. That's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
The
I
anti-Studio
mean, it was
54.
really started by Steve Mass for his artist friends, and the doorman was just this guy named Richard.
Richard
who-
Bach.
Richard Bach, who now lives up here, not far from Woodstock, where I live. And we've become friends again, but I hadn't seen him in 30 years in all that time. He's an artist, but then he was just a skinny guy standing outside the Mud Club in an oversized
Pea
overcoat
Yeah.
or trench coat because it was cold standing out there. And he would just, I don't know, I just knew him, and he'd say, "Oh, Peter, okay, how many do you have with you?" And just usher you into the club. And there was this line of people waiting to get in. So in that regard, it was a little like Studio 54.
Yeah, I have a kind of funny story. I interviewed Helen Mirren back in the 70s.
The great Helen Mirren.
Great Helen Mirren. She was in they had shot 2 Shakespeare, in London they were shooting every Shakespeare play. And she was in 2 of them. And she was in this, she came to New York to promote the series. And she was wearing spandex and leopard skin, and she had like her hair in a ponytail, and she was in tears because Shakespeare Festival, the Shakespeare Company, wouldn't let her wear the clothes that she liked to wear, like the spandex and stuff. So I said, how would you like to go to the Mud Club tonight? And she said, oh, yes, I would really love to go. Oh, I said, I'll come back later and pick you up and we'll go down. So we went there.
And was she wearing spandex?
And she was dressed in what she liked to wear, tights and leopard skin and stuff. And she and I danced. We did the pogo all night. It was pogo time. We did the pogo and we danced. And she was in ecstasy. She loved it so much. And
but probably nobody knew it was Helen Mirren.
No, she was unknown here. Really.
Right,
She was in Oh Lucky Man. That was like the only movie I knew her from. We were the last two people there. Everyone had left. The sun was coming up. We were sitting on a bench inside the club. They were sweeping. We had to get out. And I only lived a block away, so I was going to go home. And I put her in a cab. And she went home and she went back to her hotel, which was the
Algonquin.
The Algonquin. Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
And so I'm walking home, and when I get home, the phone rings, and it's Helen Mirren saying, oh, she wanted me to go to London with her. She said, please come to London with me. But when I said, I can't, I've got a life here. I can't just go to London.
I've got to do my column.
Yeah. So I probably shouldn't even say this, but I got a phone call from her, and she said, you sure you don't want to come with me? I'm packing my panties right now. And that's my Helen Mirren story.
Were they spandex?
So anyway, that's my Helen Mirren story.
And I'm sure
she
looked great in spandex. I mean, she had one of the great figures of
now
all time.
And now she's my age, because we apparently were the same age. I had no idea. She's my age, and she looks amazing. She's
Still,
so
yes.
fantastic. Yeah, I should have gone with her, but she did better because she married that director. So
That director guy.
Yeah, the director guy.
Well, that was
I was gonna say, do you have a story
about the
to
Mud
match
Club.
that?
We're not on that level of close brushes with fame. I did one night there was another club called TR3 that was near there, that opened a little bit after the Mud
Barrett
Club.
somewhere?
West
around
Broadway.
there?
West Broadway.
West
It was
Broadway.
Also called Tier 3.
Tier 3, yeah.
And it had these very odd stairs at one point, and the stair steps had mirrors affixed to them, and there were mirrors all around, and people would sit on the stairs, and there was a woman sitting there, smoking and carrying on, and I could see in the mirror, she had her legs apart, and I was thinking, oh, you can see everything in here. This is so. And then I looked at her face, and I realized, oh, it's Marianne Faithfull.
Oh.
Marianne Faithfull, who had come back from the dead almost. This was 1978.
She was always passing out at Heathrow. She always collapsed. She always.
Yeah, after her affairs with Mick and Keith. I mean, she went from being this beautiful virginal-looking woman on those album covers, as tears go by, and now she had this very kind of whiskey-soaked voice, all the.
I love her now. I love her vocals.
But this was just before her comeback album Broken English came out.
Yeah.
And she was just sort of doing the club scene. And I thought, oh, what a shame, what's happened to Marianne Faithfull. But then she became one of the people whose records they would play at the Mud Club, and like, why'd you do it?
Well, now she does like ballads and old favorites with that voice, that
Standards.
Yeah, she does like cabaret kind of singing.
Yeah, it's all the whiskey and cigarettes.
Yeah, I like it though,
Oh,
because
she's-
I just love her so much that I'll listen to anything she does.
But that was it. You didn't know who was going to show up. And the thing about the Mud Club being sort of democratic, that it wasn't that they would turn away Mick Jagger or Bianca if they came to the door, but that wasn't who Steve wanted.
No, it was Tina Lahotsky.
Tina Lahotsky.
And Marilyn.
And Marilyn. Tina Lahotsky and Marilyn. Tina Lahotsky is dead, sadly.
Yes. And, you know,
I miss her so much.
many of those characters, and you know, with James Chance from
Oh yeah.
the Contortions, and
Mm-hmm.
Anya Phillips has also passed away. And
What about, speaking of Anya, what about the CBGBs?
well, CB's was, you know, the sort of punk rock venue, but it was, I would say, even more kind of run down than the Mud Club. I mean, the Mud Club, you had to be careful if you went to the bathrooms and the men's room and back. There was a what do you call it, a drain in front, and it would get clogged, you know, with something eventually. And you could see it was just empty Heineken's bottles swimming around in a kind of maelstrom, and you had to be careful to step over it because, you know, the raw sewage was coming from the sinks and God knows what. But the CBGB was like that. The men's room in CBGB's, it's actually, I think they saved the toilet there, or the wall where all the graffiti was written on, because it was so unbelievably, you know, horrific. Meanwhile, it had maybe the best sound system in New York City at that time. So for a club that size, when you heard the Ramones, you really heard them, and crystal clear sound. I think I lost a good 5 or 10% of my hearing because it was so small. You'd be within 20 feet of the stage and within 15 or 20 feet of those speakers.
I only went there once, and I'm really shocked that I did, and it was a horrible band. They were dressed in fatigues and army. You know what band that could have been, and they were just loud, fast rules. You know, and it ruled me right out of there.
Yeah,
But I feel I missed something by not going there more frequently.
there were plenty of good bands there.
Yeah,
I mean,
Blondie
Blondie,
used to play
Talking
there.
Heads, and Television, and
Yeah.
Handsome Dick Manitoba, and the Dictators, and you know, but a whole range. It was potluck on any given night. You know, there were awful bands that played there too.
Handsome Dick Manitoba. That's right. I
Yes.
forgot about him.
And you know, and Max's was, again, you know, within walking distance. So there was a place on Houston Street called the Rock Lounge.
Hurrah was good.
Hurrah was uptown.
Yeah, I know, but it was good. It was
also good, yes.
Civilized.
Danceteria.
And you had the great DJ, the woman.
Anita Sarko.
No. She was a radio DJ, and she would play at Hurrah.
Alison
really
Steele. Who was the DJ at Hurrah?
And so let's.
Well, the thing about the Mud Club, here's the thing. The DJs that Steve Mass hired were not professional DJs. David Azark, who was probably the most famous, that became the most famous.
Really?
Well, with Anita Sarko and Johnny Dynell, but David had no background as a DJ other than spinning records at parties and things. And they just played what they liked.
Yeah, Anita had a fierce policy. She played what she liked, and you couldn't request anything.
You know, yes, they play the latest Marianne Faithfull record, songs like Why'd You Do It, which was too obscene to be played on radio at that time, or at any time. But they would also play Tommy James and the Shondells. I mean, I think that was the first place I ever heard Moni Moni or Hanky Panky played in a club. They would never play that at Studio 54. And they play Billy Idol, White Wedding, so they mixed it up, and they played James Brown.
I like that though.
But that was what was fun. You
I
know,
like the mix-up, because I think at Studio 54 it got the disco music, which I love. Don't get me wrong. Got boring after a while hearing the same thing.
It was
over
all
and over
disco,
again.
all the strings,
disco,
all the horns, all the synthesizers.
Fly Robin Fly.
On your mystery ship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had a great light show and all that, whereas the Mud Club, nothing. There were no chairs on the ground floor of the Mud Club. There was no place to sit, even the bar.
That
didn't have bar
corrugated
stools.
metal curtain on the stage.
Well, when they played, but they didn't always have live music. That was maybe Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers.
I performed there once.
I've seen
3 songs.
photos of you.
I wrote 2 songs. Yeah, I wrote 2 songs and did a cover of another one.
Well, that's a good.
And I can't sing, so
So how did you get the gig?
I don't know. I don't know how I was able to do that. Oh, I think no, I don't know how that. Because I was me. I don't know because they wanted to. Because I wrote about them a lot. I guess maybe I don't know.
Well, that was it. So
And it was
News did cover that. Did cover the Mud Club, and
No, I really was kind to the Mud Club.
we got to hang
Yeah,
out
every
there
night.
in exchange. Let's face it. It
Yeah.
was a form of graft.
So
But-
guys, what
yeah.
was since we were based in Soho? Do you have any memories of actually what Soho was like outside
Well-
of the club scene? I mean, these
The actual Soho.
actual Soho.
Because when I first moved to New York with my wife, we found a loft on the 6th floor of a building on Mercer and Houston. It was huge, and it was $250 a month. But it needed a lot of work. We had to put a bathroom in and
A fixer-upper.
kitchen, yeah. And get rid of the 50 years of plastic dust because it had been a factory. But I loved Soho then. It was really an artist community. Everything was artist in residence. There was one restaurant, Cold Food,
Gordon Matta Clark.
and I just loved it. And there were no, I don't think there were any clubs around in Soho at that time.
Well,
It
it
was Finelli's
depends.
bar. And,
Well, Finelli's was
Yeah.
the bar which is still there.
yeah.
And that was a good place to eat lunch. But there were, I started out as a jazz writer, jazz critic. And at Soho, I'd already written for the Village Voice and other places. But there were what we were calling loft jazz, where jazz musicians would buy or lease a loft space, which is really just an empty industrial space. Like there were 2 of them on Bond Street, which now has one of the most expensive restaurants in New York. But at the time, there was a place called Studio Ribby on Bond Street, just off of Broadway or between Broadway and Lafayette. Another one called the Ladies Fort. And these were very inexpensive. For $2 or $3, you could go there and hear, the latest jazz. A lot of jazz then was coming in from out of the city. So from Chicago, where they had something called the AACM, Association for the Advancement of Creative Music. And all of these new jazz musicians were coming and playing in these lofts. There was another one I was just reading a review, Axis in Soho, that had lots of jazz. And these clubs, or these lofts, were all within walking distance of each other. That, to me, there was a bar on Green Street called Ali's Alley, run by Rashid Ali, who had been John Coltrane's last drummer before he died. And it was one of the few lofts where you could buy drinks and food. But then you could walk a few blocks to CBGB's. You could walk, maybe 10 blocks up to Max's on 17th Street and Park Avenue South. And the Bottom Line, which opened in the 70s, was on, I think, Mercer and West 4th Street, right on the corner. And that was catering to record company acts. But there were a wide range there were new acts like, Steve Forbert would play there. It was the first time I heard him there. Springsteen played there. And when Stiff Records started
Oh,
in
I
England,
love Stiff Records.
they had the Stiff tour came over and they played, and this was...
If it ain't stiff, it ain't worth a fuck. That was their logo.
Their great logo. And so they had, Nick Lowe, Elvis Costello, Ian Dury and the Blockheads, Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick, Wake Up and Make Love to Me, all these...
There was the Mercer Art Center, also,
before
where
it collapsed.
where the dolls,
The New York
before it
Dolls
collapsed,
started at the Mercer Art Center on Mercer Street, oddly enough. But it was behind the Broadway Central Hotel, a notorious hotel. And I think it was, in 1972, that it just imploded.
I must have
Or
been
maybe it
after
was
that because
later.
I was there probably around 19 in it,
in the early
watching
70s.
the Dolls, which I was obsessed with them. Fantastic, my favorite band at the time.
And the Dolls were inspired by transvestite artists who'd been playing at Club 82, which was a drag club on West 4th
Yeah, I went to Club 82,
and,
yeah.
and 2nd Avenue, which was around the corner from where I
Yeah.
first lived. And
I missed the drag part. I went late to Club 82. It
yeah,
was just a regular drug
drug
dive.
den.
Yeah.
But so there was these connections. And they also had jazz at Mercer Arts Center. I saw Carl Berger, the German jazz vibraphonist there. But there were so many people coming to New York, and it was so cheap to live. So
I know.
you know, people from all of these
Or
bands.
downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say from 14th Street to what's now Tribeca. I'm not sure when they even started calling it Tribeca, but that's where the Mud Club was located, on a white street.
And I was living there later, above the Baby Doll Topless Go-Go Lounge, in a loft, in another loft for like nothing.
Yeah. So this was, it was a combination of things. There were cheap rent, but it wasn't just cheap rent. There were a lot of creative people from different media. It wasn't just music.
Mm-hmm.
There were, and there were performance spaces, like the Performing Garage,
And artists.
and the kitchen.
Yeah, and
So-
artists had studios there.
Yes,
Yeah.
a lot of, visual artists, painters, sculptors,
Yeah.
and so on. Because it was very big space for very little money. And yet, we'd go outside. The back door of our third and final Soho News office, which was located on Broadway,
Yeah.
but the back door led onto Crosby Street. And we'd go out there for a smoke back when everybody smoked cigarettes. And you just see, the trucks unloading and these guys, rolling carts of either clothing or hardware, some kind of things. And I remember having this stupid fantasy of, why couldn't I have a nice, simple, reliable job like that? Instead of this job where I never know if I'm going to get paid.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going.
Billy, who gave us our checks? Billy.
I forget. Yes.
Sometimes he didn't give you.
Sometimes he
didn't
didn't.
give you a check.
And what about Michael? Talk about Michael.
Michael Longacre.
Goldstein.
Oh, Goldstein.
Oh, the founder.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, him.
Well, we all worked for.
That's right.
Michael.
And it was originally located in his loft. The first time I went to any Soho News thing, a friend of mine who was writing for New Times magazine, which I was reviewing for, said, you should go try this new paper that just opened in Soho. And it was walking distance from my house. And I went up this elevator and there was like this guy's loft. And he was there. And I think Yakov Cohn, who was the first editor there, this kind of surly character who had been the editor of the East Village Other, right? Who walked with canes because he had been run over by a tank in the 6 Days War in Israel, or
War of Independence. in
War of
48.
Independence for 48. See, he was older than I thought. And he was great. He said, Jess, here, what do you want to write about? Oh, you want to write about Jack T. Jeanette? Yeah, he played with Miles, right? Sure, go ahead, go and just bring it back. And I did. I brought the piece in, and they published it pretty much as I wrote it. So as I look back now and reread some of my earlier pieces, I think, too bad I couldn't have had a real editor. But on the other hand, you had the freedom to write about whatever you
Yeah.
wanted.
It was the alternative to the alternative.
To the Village Voice.
Village Voice, yeah. Which was becoming a mainstream.
It was, and also kind of snooty. I mean,
Yeah.
that's when Bob Christgau became the music editor there, and he was very he'd come from an Ivy League background, I think Dartmouth or something, and he was like, "You're going to be edited." And I said, "Oh, this is good. This is what I was, be careful what you wish for." But then I found out, I'd asked to review certain jazz musicians, and he'd say, "No, you can't really do that." Gary Giddens, who was their other reviewer, is covering the Tony Williams lifetime. And this kept happening, and then finally I said, "Bob, what's the story? You're not giving me any assignments at all." And he said, "Well, the truth is, we know that you're working at Soho News, and we've gotten the word came down not to have writers writing for both The Voice and the Soho News. So you have to make a choice."
That makes sense, though.
Yeah. So I made the choice that I went with
Are
the
you
Soho
sorry?
News.
Are you sorry?
No, because very shortly after that, the guy who had been the music editor, the original music editor at Soho News, Danny Fields, is famous for discovering the
Everybody,
Ramones and
yeah.
MC5 and Iggy Pop and all these people that he either discovered or managed or worked with. He was working at a mainstream.
And he married Nico, didn't he? He married Nico.
I think he did.
I
Yeah.
think he did.
Yeah. A lot of odd marriages taking place in those days. Maybe not as odd as Lou Reed and Laurie Anderson, but along those lines.
That's odd. No, that was odd.
It was odd, yeah.
Stephen, do you remember Michael, working with Michael at all, or not so much?
Do I remember Michael
Goldstein?
Goldstein? Sure.
Yeah.
I do, yeah. And hanging out, was at his loft, and he had parties there. Yeah, I knew him.
Yeah.
I knew he was the boss.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any dealings with him. I think he just left me alone and left the centerfold alone and whatever I was doing.
Yeah.
Well, I had one run-in with Michael that was very kind of, I was interviewing some prospective writers, and it was a big office. Michael's desk was over there. Our desks were along this wall. This was the one on Worcester or Spring Street, I think.
Spring.
Yeah, 119 Spring.
111.
111, thank you. And there was this huge industrial carpeting on the floor that was all ripped and full of holes and everything. And I was smoking there, and I put my cigarette out on the floor on this industrial carpet, and Michael, "Peter, what do you think you're doing? This is not a barn. You can't just put your cigarette out like that." And I just, I thought he was showing me up in front of these
No, I think he was right. I'm on his side here.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was torn carpet, you still don't put your cigarette out on it.
Yeah.
But that was the kind of asshole that I was back then. And so I said, "Fuck off, Michael. I can't put up with this." And he said, "You can't talk to me like that. You're fired." And I said, "Oh, okay." And it suddenly occurred to me that the lead story, the cover story that week was a story on Blondie. And we had color photos. It was one of our first color covers. And it was all sitting downstairs in the basement production department in these accordion files. I mean, that was our editorial process. The story would come in. I had edited the story. It might have been by Roy Trakin, I'm not sure. And I just went down there and I took the copy. And of course, there were no computers. The copy was the only copy. Writers didn't even keep carbon copies back then. And maybe the photos, I don't know. I just took the copy and I went home. And there was this exchange of phone calls during the day and other people intervening. And then that night there was a press party at a club right there, right in the West Village, that we both showed up at, oddly enough. And Michael came over and said, "No, come on, Peter, let's be grown up about this. I said, "Well, Michael, you embarrassed me in front of these writers, people who were coming to offer to write for us." And he said, "Yes, but you can't talk to me like that, and you can't be putting your cigarette out on the rug." And I said, "Okay, I apologize." We both apologized, and then he said, "Just bring the article back."
Alan, do you remember when Devo stole your photograph and put it on their cover of their album?
Yes, I do.
Whatever happened with that? Was it resolved? Because they literally stole it.
Right. I had shot a studio picture of them with a ring flash, so it had a really nice effect, and that's what we used on the cover of the Soho News.
Uh-huh.
And then when they came out with the album Duty Now for the Future, they had cut the Soho News cover and just pasted it up with some barcodes and other design things and used it as their album cover. And I measured it, and it was actually the exact same size.
So
as
they didn't even bother to get an original print. They just used the newsprint
They used
cover.
the actual news cover. So what?
So I contacted the record company, and I got $1,500.
Oh, you did? Oh,
Wow.
good. I thought you never got compensated. Oh, because that
No.
was...
Boy, that was about half a year's salary at the Soho News.
That was very punk, though.
Stephen, the other day you were talking about this challenge. I think it was with Wolfgang, that you had gone to as many different clubs from one night.
He tells
Was
that
that
story.
during the Soho News or after?
No, it was after.
Oh.
It was after to see who could go to... You had to have one drink. The rule was you had to have one drink and then go to the next club and the next club and the next club. Yeah, no.
Do you have any other adventures? Like the Helen Mirren story is great. Do you have?
It is great, and I was sorry I said it.
No, I'll have a follow-up that I will tell you when we're done. But do you have other stories like that? That's such a great story. I mean, we had the opportunity for so many adventures.
I don't know. Can we stop?
Yeah, we can.
Because
stop. You want to take a break?
No, I just want to say something that
Off the record.
All right.
Oh, not off the record. No, I just would think what we're doing now, and maybe this is what you want. We're talking about Soho and the clubs and stuff. But are we really talking about the paper? I thought it was a Soho News documentary, and we seem to be talking less about
The
Soho News and
newspaper?
more about ourselves.
Well, I know we were talking
and
about
Soho
Goldstein.
and Soho at the time.
Well,
Well,
they're inextricably
So I want to do what you want.
interlocked,
no,
right?
this is fine because everything that we're talking about related to the fact that we were doing these things for the paper and that we all worked at the paper together. So if there are digressions, I mean, when you went to see Helen Mirren, that was for the paper.
That was a paper story. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything we did for the paper led to all kinds of other things. And as I mentioned to Peter the other day, that, and maybe you want to expound on it, is that we were part of the scene ourselves. We were scene makers. We were not just observers like somebody coming from a foreign magazine or
Right.
from the New York Times. We were there doing it ourselves, living it ourselves all the time. So that's how, so it's all part of what the paper is.
Yeah, and that's later on when we don't do that. Later on when we made
Well, this is-
Details magazine, it was the same thing where we
Yeah.
were actually creating.
This is still running, by the way. It's been running. It's still running. That's all right. It's going to be edited.
I hate him.
It's going to be
I
edited.
said
Don't
turn
sign
it
the release.
off.
All right.
Right. Do you remember later on when the newspaper was sold to...
Yes.
No, it was taken over by a whole new people from England, and they hired new staff and everything. The guy who was the copy editor wouldn't let us put the U in glamour. We had to spell it American, and also cigarette with Cigaret. Do you remember that? It was a tough.
No.
They
no, I
tried to
don't
make it
remember
into
that.
like a tough newspaper instead of what it was. You don't remember that? Because we were all. I know Annie Flanders was so upset about that and refused to
Glamour.
follow that. Yeah.
Yes, but wasn't Glamour magazine spelled with
With
a
the
U?
U, that's how you spell it.
Yeah.
Unless you're, what's his name?
John Leese. He was the guy they sent over. He always looked like a character from a gangster movie. He had this
Oh, yeah, that's right,
pockmarked
yeah.
face. And when he first came, the Associated Newspaper Group was the company
Yes,
that
it was.
bought Soho News from Goldstein. And you know, it was
Then they hired-
good and bad. He owed me a lot of back salary, and he was able to pay it when they bought the paper, and I'm sure he made a lot of money out of it. But it was a disaster for the paper because these guys from England didn't really have any idea of the scene, of what they kind of let us do our thing, but on the other hand, they didn't. And when they first came over, John Leese invited a number of editors and other people up to his hotel. He was staying in some very high-priced Midtown hotel. And I remember he was in the lobby and he had ordered some kind of drink, and they gave him like a crab claw entree or crab claw appetizers. And at one point he sort of pushed one, oh, would you like this claw? Because he could tell that, we didn't have a lot of money and we probably could use some free food. And he said, and I said, I was making the case that, this paper will only succeed if you let the local people call the shots, and, you can overlook the finances and all of that, and good luck with that, but you have to let us do it. He said, oh, I understand what you're saying. We used to have this saying when I was at the Daily Mail, is that I don't care if the editor's a bastard, as long as I know which bastard is editor. So, that was the kind of British gangster humor we had to
Then they
put
hired
up
that
with.
husband and wife team.
Oh, Josh and Carol.
Yeah.
Careful, Carol is now involved with the Parks Department of New York State. She has some.
She's the chairperson.
She's the chair.
Yeah, she's a director. And Josh Friedman.
Yes,
Yeah.
the Pulitzer Prize winning.
And then they
author.
hired that new arts director, that lesbian woman,
Tracy.
Tracy. Yeah, Tracy, who fired me.
Tracy Young.
Tracy Young, yeah, and
Yes.
she fired me.
Really?
And then everybody went on strike. This is a really good story.
Oh, good.
If you recall. Were you part of that? Were you
Probably.
on strike too?
You
And the paper was not going to be published unless I was rehired. And I had been I was reviewing movies. I was a movie reviewer.
right.
And she hired Richard Corliss, who,
the great
is
Richard
very well
Corliss.
known.
Yes. Well, okay.
To take my place. So everybody went on strike. There was not going to be a magazine, a newspaper, unless I was rehired. And Jerry Maserati suggested I write about nightlife because I was a habitué of the Mud Club and wrote about the people there. And so that's how I got my career, my second career started, was because of him.
And that was, and who got his reward by going on to the New York Times.
Yeah.
Jerry. He was an art critic or the art editor at the time. He was the art section editor.
Well, although I remember he loved the Feelies. That's something I always remember.
Well, this was another issue that came up, that we had so many free passes to get into clubs, and I really had a good laugh when I was friends with Bob Palmer of the Times, the great music reviewer for the New York Times, who wrote about jazz and rock and roll with equal dexterity. And he told me that that at the Times they were not allowed to accept free passes, concert, but they had to pay for everything and be reimbursed by the paper so that they maintained their their integrity. And I just thought that was hilarious. Like, we wouldn't have been able to go anywhere because there was no fund for us to be reimbursed. But people really abused it at the paper, and sometimes I would go or I'd call up the Bottom Line to get tickets, and they'd say, oh, we already have 4 people from the Soho News, David Hershkovitz and Maserati and people from the production department, and people who weren't even part of editorial were calling, getting their names on the list. And, I didn't blame them. It was kind of funny, but at a certain point you had to sort of cease and desist, or we couldn't get our perks. But the two were interrelated. The area of Soho, and by Soho I really mean the surrounding areas, are now called Tribeca and NoHo or Nola. All these different
Nola.
districts. They keep that's New Orleans. It's NoHo. I
Yeah.
guess.
Nolita.
Nolita.
Later, yeah.
Oh, really? What a sin to use the name of one of the great books of all time, so to play off on it. But anyway, yeah, it from, let's say, the Bowery and 3rd Avenue to 7th Avenue in the west, and then certainly from White Street, where the Mud Club was, up to 14th Street or 17th Street, let's say. They were all, so you could just open a page of music ads and you'll see all the clubs. And there were new ones opening all the time. I remember when the Ritz opened, this huge building on, 10th Street off of 4th Avenue, between 3rd and 4th Avenue, that used to be a Latin dance hall, and it still had this enormous mirrored ball that looked like something out of a disco, because it had been the kind of disco of its day. And, Jerry Brandt called and asked me what it would take to get them on the cover of the Soho News. And I said, well, we'll come out there and check it out. I'm sure we'll want to write about it. He says, no, I want a cover story. And what do you need? I said, well, I just need to get into the club, and we'll see if it's going to be a cover story or not. He said, no, you don't get what I'm talking about. And he started naming numbers. And I just thought it was one of those funny moments where you can't believe this is happening. And the numbers were so low. I think I said, well, add a couple of more zeros and then we'll see. We'll think about it. But, the Ritz turned out to be a terrific club. They had great shows there.
Amazing.
And all kinds. I was just looking at one of their ads from 77 or 78, and you had, Public Image, Psychedelic Furs, and then it would have...
The Divinals.
Divinal.
I love them. But, yeah.
Helen Wheels.
And then it would have reggae, Peter Tosh, followed by Toots and the Maytals, and then they would have R&B acts and blues acts, and then more, Tough Darks and Talking Heads, and the whole range of music. And again, this was all within. Now that wasn't in Soho; that was in the West Village. But I thought of that as part of the scene, part of the area that we covered. And yes, you could have done that same thing you did with your friend at Decals. Certainly you could have done that in the 70s to see how many clubs you could, could visit in one night. And other after-hours clubs began to open after the Mud Club, like Berlin, which was, opened at 1 or 2 a.m. or something.
Yeah, and then after Soho News folded, there were a lot more clubs also underground.
What do you remember about the last days of the Soho News? The last day.
Well, it was sort of sad. Everybody was suddenly informed.
Did we party?
Huh?
Did we have a party or anything?
There was a big gathering at the paper. Were you there for that, Stephen?
I must have been.
Yeah, John Leese was talking.
Yes, he was saying that. The truth was the Associated Newspaper, which also published the Daily Mail. Was it the Daily Mail? They decided they were going to start a Sunday edition, and so that's why they sold off their American colonial newspaper, because of course it wasn't making any money. I don't think the Soho News ever turned a profit, but this was a very sad day, and nobody really was very happy about it. and everybody had been talking about getting other jobs and lining up new work. And I never did that. I probably should have, but I remember going to other publications like Hi-Fi Stereo Review and applying to be their record review editor. And a woman told me that I was overqualified. I said, well, I'm not asking for a lot of money. I just want to do this work. And I think the job finally went to Bob Christkow's sister. No, don't print that. I don't know.
M.S. Baruch.
Who's that?
I don't know. He did this posthumous comics.
Well, a lot of people came in. I mean, a lot of people got their start writing at the Soho News, and Ira Kaplan
Bill
also
Plimpton.
wrote for New York
Did
Rocker.
Bill
Bill-
Plimpton
I don't know
do stuff for us?
if that was he did Gertrude's Follies for us. I don't know if he was doing things for other people at that time.
But I mean, he's, like a celebrated visual artist, or animator.
Oh,
No.
absolutely.
He's done commercials for Charmin.
Well, I'm not sure if that's a step up or not. But,
Financially, I would say.
well, anything financially was a step up. But, Doug Ireland, I think, was one of the best known columnists who wrote for us and really had following. So the Soho News didn't make a profit, but it had a lot of clout in a lot of areas. I know we always got a lot of ads from fashion and music were two of the sections that
And movies.
movies got a lot of ads because we would cover things that weren't necessarily covered somewhere else.
Here's some of the movies we got ads for. Sex Tool
Well,
and Jack Wrangler in Gemini. Yeah, some really good stuff. Fred Halstead triple feature. Oh, Sex Tool, LA Praise Itself, and Sex Garage. Yeah. But we were happy to get the money.
I remember covering the premiere for Blow Dry.
Oh. Who was in that? Do you recall?
I can look at the marquee, it's in the shot. Peony John was in.
What, are you looking for something that I can maybe find?
yeah, I'm looking for that ad from the.
Did you remember this? Didn't you go and steal this off the screen? This image?
Was that one or
Close
the one
Encounters?
inside? Yeah, I did take pictures from
Yeah.
the screen. Yes.
This was like the most exciting thing happening at the time, and you were there taking an illegal photograph of the screen. Yeah, good for you.
I wouldn't do it again.
No, of course not.
You wouldn't do it now?
No. Get prosecuted.
Wouldn't you?
So,
Seriously?
oh, here's that ad from the Ritz that I was talking about. It's 1981, and it begins with, and this is just for the month of July. Psychedelic Furs, Max Romeo, Gang of Four from England, Phoebe Snow, singer-songwriter, Romeo Void, The A's, David Johansen with the Lenny Kaye connection opening.
With whom?
Really?
Lenny Kaye.
Ah.
Wishbone Ash, Joe Jackson's Jump and Jive, Conway Twitty, A Blast from the Past, Motorhead with Lemmy, The Cure, the fabulous Dennis Brown, who was a great reggae singer and performer, followed by Peter Tosh, Jerry Lee Lewis, back from the dead, followed by Iggy Pop. I mean, and Kraftwerk, followed by Smokey Robinson.
Actually, I saw Kraftwerk at the Ritz. So
And,
maybe, when was that?
This was in July of 81. And then the superstars of jazz fusion, Roy Ayers, Bobby Humphrey, Lonnie Liston Smith, none of whom were really fusion musicians, but doesn't matter. Razzie Bailey, Curtis Mayfield, and B.B. King. You
That
know,
is some lineup.
what a month.
Yeah, 1 month.
Start with the psychedelic furs and end with B.B. King. And
Wow.
have all of that in between. And really, it wasn't a bad club.
No, it was comfortable.
They
And
had a nice
it had the mezzanine.
a mezzanine
Yeah.
up there, where odd things often happen.
Saw Marianne Faithfull sang there, and David Bowie and the blonde actress, French, sitting at a table upstairs, and all I could do was just stare at them for the entire evening together. What is her name?
Catherine Deneuve?
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Catherine Deneuve, yes, exactly. So that was some.
with David
that was
Bowie
a night.
on her arm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so people make a lot of Studio 54 and the VIP room and how, Bianca and Mick and Halston and all of those people were always there. But it seems like the same dozen people, Andy Warhol, Halston, Bianca, Jerry Hall, every night. Whereas, in places like the Mud Club or the
They were
Ritz,
available.
well, you never knew who was going to show up. And that was part of the fun.
What is this headline? Inside the Gay Motel by Catherine Barkin.
One
Is that
One never
memorable?
knows. Page 10, let's find out. And I mean, that's right next to Avant-Garde Theater Festival.
Well, that makes sense.
The motel comes to the mountain, the mecca of the gay resorts. I
So
mean,
which one?
I
Is
think
this,
this-
is this the Gay Motel? Maybe it means
this was
happy.
a
Maybe they meant
space.
happy
This
motel.
was a space filler for us. I mean, obviously we had a large gay clientele, a gay readership. And I remember there was a writer, Don Shuey, was doing
Don
music
Shuey,
reviews for
yeah.
me, but he also was a big theater fan. And when we needed to get a new theater editor to replace the departing editor, his
Yes.
name I forget.
You married to John Perrault?
No,
John
it wasn't.
Shuey? And Shuey and John Perrault, aren't they?
No.
Are they boyfriends?
No, Don Shuey was with the film reviewer for the New York Times. His name will come to me in a minute.
Huh.
But I said to Josh, who was the editor who was installed by the British people, that I think Don would make a great theater editor because he really knows theater. And he said, but isn't he gay? I said, well, yeah, Don is gay. I said, who do you think supports the theater in
Exactly.
New York and makes up, a large portion of the clientele and the performers? That he just didn't get it. Well, Josh often didn't get things. I remember an editorial meeting where we were trying to decide who to put on the cover, and we had Eddie Murphy had just started at Saturday Night Live, where he's just beginning to make a name. And we like to get people before they were
Yeah.
big stars. And we had an interview with him. We had great color photos. And Josh was sitting at the editorial meeting. We were going around like reasons why Eddie Murphy should go on the cover. And Josh said, well, I just don't get, if we're going to have a black cover, why would it be a black baseball player? He thought we were talking about Eddie Murray, who had been a big slugging star for the Baltimore Orioles, I think, for years. Josh knew sports more than he knew what was happening. He never watched Saturday Night Live. He didn't know what was going on. He thought we wanted to put a ball player on the cover. That would have been weird, I admit, but that was the kind of level that we were dealing with under the British colonial ownership.
We remember the editorial meeting where Josh was also confused about the theater group, Malibu Mines, and he said, why are we doing this story on the Malibu Mines?
Can't we find a local act?
The Malibu Mines.
Yeah, that kind of happened a lot, and you had to.
And Carol would wear those muumuus in the office, the publisher wearing those muumuu dresses.
Oh yes, well they were. I mean, here's the thing. Yes, we kind of made fun of them because they were old
Occhiogrosso.
hippies. Calling Planet Earth. What's that?
James S. Rigberg. You wrote something about it.
Well, see, that was probably
Cattle mutilation.
Oh yeah, these were people who wrote books about aliens, alien visitors from outer space. It's a minor obsession of mine. Anyway, I'm sorry. I was saying we made fun of Josh because he was kind of an old hippie. He had gotten a Pulitzer Prize for being part of a team that wrote a series of articles about 3 Mile Island, and he had this kind of activist record as an investigative reporter. But in fact, most of us were coming from the '60s and had been through the '60s and were involved in this transition to a different kind of art scene. The music scene certainly was different from what it had been in the '60s. In the 1970s, everything was this arena rock. Bands like Electric Light Orchestra and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Bachman Turner Overdrive, and they were frankly boring. And then suddenly, as Stephen was saying, the New York Dolls showed up in '71 and '72, and some of the glam rock from England, Bowie and Suzi Quatro and bands like T-Rex. And then in the mid-'70s, punk and new wave hit the scene, and they were new to all of us. We were all kind of learning as we went. And that was kind of, the paper was about that transition period, and I think that's part of what makes it unique in a historical sense, that even the people running it and the editorial staff were coming from a '60s background, but were very aware of what was happening in the new scene, and we got into it, and in some cases got sucked into it, and as Stephen was saying, became sort of habitués of these clubs and the nightlife scene that was going on. I mean, I used to get up at midnight to go out to jazz clubs because that was when the best music was playing in the lofts. But then all of a sudden I would get off work at midnight or 1 a.m. and it was 6 blocks to walk down to the Mud Club. So from '78 until the paper closed in '82, that was a place to hang out. And the other places down there like Tier 3 and Berlin and Area and Heat. It really was as much, and the people you would meet at those clubs weren't just musicians. They were, the artists, architects, dancers, like Stephen mentioned, food. That restaurant, which was one of the few restaurants in Soho at the time, but it was created by Gordon Matta Clark, the architect, and
Johnny Darno worked there. And,
yes.
Jessica Blue, who later was killed in Soho by being dragged by a truck. She got hooked onto a truck and dragged.
Not long
Very
ago.
sad. Huh?
Wasn't that? When was that?
A few years ago, I think.
A few years ago.
Yeah, it was very sad. But anyway, yeah, but artists, it was an artist community, and artists and
Yeah.
the neighborhood worked there, this cafeteria style. I miss
Yes,
that too.
food was almost like they invented the salad bar or something.
Yeah.
They had sushi, they had all different kinds of food, and it was inexpensive.
Yeah.
And of course, it was right across the street from our office.
It was like, was it right across the street? Because
It
it
was
was
on
like
Fences.
one of the only buildings on that street. It's like, it was all nothing.
Yeah, there was.
And
a lot of nothing, like
and then
Crosby
food,
Street.
and then food, and that was like the barest. I mean, it was called food, and didn't have a fancy name. I love that.
And really, we should have seen the end coming, because when was it, in 79 that this club called Pravda was scheduled to open on Crosby Street within, I don't know, 100 yards of the back door of the Soho News office, and it was run by Jim Farrat and Rudolph Pieper, who had collaborated on Danceteria beforehand, which was one of the top rock dance clubs and music clubs. It had 3 different locations in New York, and we got a preview tour. Rudolph and Farrat came and took me and maybe you, Boo, and a couple of people to see the inside of.
I saw the inside
You saw
as
it,
well.
and it was this very sort of Nouveau Bauhaus kind of look. The bars came out, jutted out at strange angles rather than being flat and round. They were like the prow of the ship. And they had an upstairs, they had private offices with a private shower. And I remember thinking, well, this could really be convenient to have out within walking distance from the newspaper, talk about perks. But then they over the opening night was Fiorucci threw a party for Wet magazine.
Yeah. By the way, the anticipation for Pravda was amazing. I mean, we knew about it for a long time before it ever.
I mean, it heard $400,000 had been invested in it, and all of this, and it took up an entire building on Crosby Street, which I think now has been converted to luxury condos. But this party and it was supposed to be the preview, the night before the opening, this private party for Wet magazine, which was this avant-garde magazine, I think from LA, or the West Coast. And hundreds and hundreds of people showed up out in the street, even before, it wasn't even dark out.
That's right.
Yeah, I was there with Sari Becker, the publicist, and we were being crushed in the crowd together. And Sari turned to me and said, this reminds me of that Bellamy Brothers song. I said, what's that? She said, if I said you had a beautiful body, would you hold it against me? Because we were literally being squished together. And we finally got in, and it was a nightmare inside. They had these old staircases that had been part of the original factory that maybe 2 people could walk up abreast. And hundreds of people were trying to get up to the 2nd and 3rd floors because it was an open bar. And I just ended up leaving. And as I said, this is really a major accident waiting to happen. And as I went out, I saw the New York City Fire Department coming in. I guess the fire marshal had been called. And Rudolph later complained that the nouveau riche moving into Soho, couples with strollers, as he put it sarcastically. Oh, what a horrible thing. Continuing the birth rate. But had called the police, and apparently they didn't have the proper permits, or they hadn't paid off the right people, whatever. And we always knew that there was...
The opening was also the
closing night.
Yeah.
Yes, it never did officially open. But that was another thing. We knew that there was mob money was involved in these clubs, as it had always been in New York City, going back to before the speakeasies, to clubs like the places like the original Peppermint Lounge with Joey D and the Starlighters. I think all of these clubs, either there were investment money came from shadowy sources, or they didn't have the proper liquor licenses. And now they'll probably send somebody out to break my legs for saying this. But I think, we just accepted that as part of the New York City nightlife scene.
Yeah, Pravda for all that effort that went into it. And by the way, speaking of the crowding, you imagine what it was like taking pictures there. That was really a challenge.
Yeah, you were there.
But I was there, but that was it. One night, all that effort, one night, never to open again.
I heard that there was a story that Jerry Brandt once threw Jim Farrat off the outdoor balcony of the Ritz.
Oh, really?
Because he said, you know, his name ends in rat appropriately. So
Jim Farrat was a fantastic character, and
he used to dye his eyelashes.
Yes, but he also belonged to a group that he had started called FAF, a non-acronym for Fags Against Facial
Oh,
Hair,
yeah.
which was bizarre. But he also was the first person who
I
ever...
think I wrote about that.
You probably
No, in the
that
Soho
sounds
News.
like a Soho News story.
No, I wrote about it and I gave it a different name that was more appropriate, and I can't remember now.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
Jim was never appropriate, but he was always on the cutting edge. One day he walked into the office with this odd-looking device, and he put it on the floor, and he said, "This is just come out of Japan. It's called a Walkman."
Oh, yeah.
He had the first Sony Walkman in America. It came out in Japan in 6 months before, and he had a thing like a 2-for-1 splitter where two people could listen
Yeah.
to the same outlet. And I put it on and I thought, oh my God, where can I get one of these? And you knew this, he was right. This was, everybody was going to have one. And that was really, for me, the beginning of the whole digital revolution in a way, where you just carried your world around with you, you carried your music around. The clubs were like that. I mean, the Mud Club was the radio station that you couldn't hear on the radio.
I wrote something in the Soho News. I went around the city asking people what they were listening to on their Walkman, and then I published it. I published what the songs
So
that were
yeah,
popular.
I think it was 79 was the year it came out, so that was probably, but you know, it's the one step to the iPhone and Apple Music and everything else, but that was really kind of where it began, where you could
Jim
create
Farrat was
your own
always
universe.
ahead of the times because he introduced me to some very interesting 45 RPMs. You know, just the latest music from wherever.
The 12-inch 45s, the dance records.
No, and
No.
the small ones, yeah,
Uh-huh.
with red plastic or yellow
Red
plastic
vinyl,
or
yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yes, he also backed some unlistenable bands, like the Cocteau Twins, I remember.
They are hard to listen to, aren't they? I try because they've got a good name, but it's
That's what he was playing for me on the Walkman, and I remember thinking,
Yeah.
you know, great device, terrible band,
yeah.
you know. But, so, you know, he took the good with the bad with Jim, but he was definitely brilliant. And he's still doing it. He's still leading, I don't know, kind of something in the city.
He's
Fighting
a community activist.
community
Community
activist.
board or something.
Yeah, fighting for tenants' rights. So, people like that were the kind of people that you would see at Soho News office.
We need to see that. We need you to turn the camera around so we can see Jimmy in your lap.
There it goes. FaceTime.
There we go. Right?
A perfectly happy dog.
Yeah. We should put a dog in everything we do.
Well, on that note,
Yeah, I think
That's my motto. Put a dog in everything we do.
we've exhausted the
for now.
potentials for
Is
now.
that it?
Yeah.
Oh, we've exhausted ourselves.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So am I finished? Because I'm leaving in 2 days.
You're finished.
Who else you gonna get? Cynthia lives here.
No, she lives in LA.
I'm sorry, in LA.
You think you're in
I'm
LA?
really
Where are
confused.
you?
I'm really confused, yeah. I'm 70, so.
Yeah, that's an excuse.
Both of you, let me see your hands. So both of you have nice hands. No, this part. Look, see that? That's gross.
I have age spots.
No.
I do.
You have the hands of a young boy. How is that possible? I hate you.
I
Look.
avoided manual labor
And
all
I have
my
to do
life.
what Quentin Chris said, always do this before you have a TV appearance. Because when you bring...
Lets the blood flow out of your wrists.
Yeah, because well, you can't tell. It takes a long time for me. Yeah, it makes it flat. Let's see. But I was noticing, yeah, I was distracted this whole time by how smooth and young your hands are. What is your secret?
Pawns. He uses pawns.
And your skin is like soft. It's just.
It's sex
Just
and
a
drugs
thing of
and rock
beauty.
and roll.
And
No,
you
it's from
got the-
going to all those after hours clubs.
You have the Santa Claus rosy cheeks and everything. You see?
I know. I know. Now
It's
you're
genetics.
embarrassing him, and it's getting even more red.
Right, because I'm feeling like you're implicitly saying I haven't done enough with my life. You know, wow, how can you look so untouched by?
Well,
The
tomorrow I'm
sorrows of
going to
life.
talk to Janelle and Chris.
Gennaro.
Janelle Blado.
Oh, Janelle, because
Yeah.
Gennaro's dead.
She lives up near where Boo's house is.
Yeah, she lives in Fleischman's. And Michael Goldstein, of course. And, then I've got to figure out who else I should be talking to that would still be around. I wanted to talk to Joanna Dendel, but she's out there in California, and for some reason Annie won't give her,
Well, what?
Didn't you say
won't
she?
give me
She can't-
Joanna's number.
Because Annie is a fucking bitch. Oh, is that? You didn't record that?
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't. Don't.
It's still all right. I'm going to turn this off now.